What's going on, Vinyl community and Kiss Army? Welcome to the 8th episode of Council of the Elder, a series discussing the hottest band in the world with Kiss fans and people in the Kiss sphere, hosted by yours truly, the Record Spinner. This episode consists of my interview / discussion with Matt Porter. Now, most of you know Matt for hosting a radio show called The Kiss Room on Monco Radio, which is centered on all things Kiss, whether it's playing Kiss tunes, solo material, covers, having guests on, or people calling in. It's an all-around good time, especially for a band that is largely ignored by most heritage rock radio stations, at least in my neck of the woods. He was also commissioned by Pophouse to curate the first ever Kiss-approved Spotify playlist called Hidden Hits, which digs much deeper into the Kiss catalog and shines a light on some more obscure material, and was part of the panel of podcasters and diehard Kiss fans that Pophouse had invited out to Vegas for input in regards to the future of the Kiss legacy. This was a great conversation, and the overall vibe that I got from Matt, and I'm sure you will too, is that he is an all-around happy-go-lucky Kiss fan, and I'm sure all of you will enjoy this episode. We talked about his Kiss origin story, his career in the communications field, the ins and outs of the Kiss Room, and we even touched on some Pophouse matters as well. I've done enough babbling, so without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, Mr. Matt Porter, take us back to the beginning. What is your Kiss origin story?
You know what? I was one of those lucky kids that in 1976 was kind of right in the crosshairs of Kiss. And so you figure 1976, I'm 8. And it was that summer when all of a sudden it started to be everywhere, and you saw it. And I always give a shout out. Our neighbor at the time was a couple years older. His name was Lenny Deal. And he was a couple years older than us. And he had those Kiss albums. And he would drag his speakers out onto the roof of their porch and be playing it. And we'd be like, well, what is that? And oh, it's Kiss. And that was really how it started. Percy, PA, every kid in Percy Elementary was a Kiss fan. So, we all went back to school that year. Everybody was talking about Kiss. And then, so you figure that's the summer of 76. Then by the time, you figure at that point to go back to school, then you have Paul in Halloween Special was like the Beatles on Ed Sullivan to a certain...
You took the words out of my mouth. That for many kids, that was that, yeah.
And it's funny when you watch it back and it's so cheesy and it, oh, Pinky, I know I'm an off-road trucker. And you're like, you can't stop laughing. But I think in some ways it's so much fun to watch because it's a snapshot of what was going on even in the 70s. Like a show like that that's so cheesy and, Margaret, and it's the Wicked Witch of the West. Margaret, can you get him to play one more song? And you're like, so 1976, I'm in that era. And coming up, I mean, everything that I was into was comic books and movies. And then we would watch Dr. Shock and professional wrestling. And so Kiss was just so to my 8-year-old mind, I mean, there was you couldn't even believe it. I certainly at 8 years old did not understand all the innuendo, as a kid, you took it. I anyway took it at very face value. They were doing something, she's sitting in the back, her head down in my lap. I'm sure they're talking. Because I'm 8. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Put your hand in my pocket, grab onto my rocket.
And you know what? It was literal. You're thinking of a real rocket. I'm 8. I was not a hip kid at the time. You know what I mean? You just as a young kid. But that was the thing. They were superheroes, and I'm still into I would draw. I would lay on the floor and draw pictures of them and listen to the records. And I shared a room. I have a twin brother who has been on my show a lot. And we really, you would listen to the records and I would read comic books and I would draw pictures of Kiss or superheroes or things like that. And if I could get in the time machine and go back to that moment, I would.
That's
So it just
that's a childhood well spent right there.
76, 77, 78. It's I always joke, like really 76. By 1977, you had the first Star Wars, which became also like religion to me.
Yeah.
And then so really, if you think about it, you had the original, all those good Kiss albums. You have the first Star Wars. You have Linda Carter in her Wonder Woman bathing suit. We haven't really improved on any of that, you know?
Yeah, that's an art form that's not been touched at all. Like pure snapshot in time.
Boom. You know, and so that's really where it starts for me. And then it was just, I've never not been a fan, you know, having grown up. And it's interesting. That's why I like talking to a young person like you, because you got the albums maybe all at once or in a bunch or we got them as they came out.
Yeah.
And this was the new album, and you'd go to the mall and you'd buy a record. And I was going to bring up, I know you love showing records. I was going to bring a stack of records and hold them up. I left them downstairs, but you know, it really, that's really where it started, was just, and even that, I think in a way in this age, it's almost impossible to really imagine. Was, first of all, you almost never saw them. If they were going to show up on TV, it was a big deal. Or if they were going to be on the radio, it was a big deal. And you'd find these magazines, and, you know, it was just so different. Like, and legit, we didn't know what they looked like. Like that, I think in a way,
the mystery was there.
And you never saw it. And I mean, in this age where, you know, I could find out what you had for breakfast if I follow you on Twitter, you know, there's no mystery. But at that time, it really was something special. So that's really, I'm one of those kids, jumped on in the 70s, never got off. So
yeah. So I was gonna say, now when you hopped on the bandwagon, like that was prime time. I mean, Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over Love, Gun Alive too. But then obviously, as history has shown, disco, pop, concept albums, were you just a loyalist off the get-go, or was it just a case where, like, you know, I kind of prefer this period more, but I'm still kind of around for the ride? Like, how did you handle all like the chopping and changing?
I think that phrase that you said, along for the ride, it felt like wherever they were going to go, I was going to go with them. And like when disco, like, you know, Dynasty, it's funny. I have great memories of Dynasty because I remember like that summer, especially, my grandparents lived up in, you know, the upstate. And I remember listening to that album. And the one time they had iron-ons that you get out of the New York Daily News, all they were was ink, and you would turn right. And I remember saying to my grandfather, "Can you get us 3 copies of the New York paper, Daily News? Because I have 2 brothers and we each want one." And our uncle saying, "Well, why do you want those?" And we're like, "Well, it's a rock band that we like." And he starts laughing. He goes, "You know what we do with rock bands? We throw rocks at them." And he had the best laugh. He starts laughing, and so it was whatever was the next thing that came out. And I was not hip to disco or the disco scene. So to me, it just sounded like I really didn't know. Like I wasn't going to Studio 54 or whatever. You know what I mean? So it just sounded different. But the thing that has always held it together was their voices. Like to me, if it's Paul and Gene, and then certainly by that point, Ace is now singing, Peter is singing, those voices together were what was always the magic. I mean, really, that's the thing, is like, it's like people talk about it a lot. Like, what is it? But there's when all of them are singing at once, like there's nothing greater. And even like when the Elder divides people a lot. When the Elder came out, so think about that. So if you do the math, I'm like 12, 13 years old, something like that. That was so in my wheelhouse because it was this fantasy. And in my mind, it's the same kind of sword and sorcery movies or whatever. And like it was this whole quest. And again, it was something you could draw. You know, I'm just a boy, but now I have this sword and I'm fighting a dragon. And I really like that stuff. I mean, and I think that's really, for me, is that I think it's why really Kiss kind of lasted forever, was the fact that it always sounded a little different. You never got sick of it. It didn't sound the same every time. And I already had all these other albums. So by the time Dynasty comes out, well, this just sounds different. You know, it wasn't like
Yeah.
a cookie cutter.
You know, the way that I see it, you know, I was thinking about that earlier today. Like, you have this golden period. I always look at 74 to 78 as just untouchable.
Yeah.
Like anything they did was perfect. But then you had these interesting excursions that, while it deviated a bit from their zeitgeist, I think just the fact that they were just experimenting and just trying different things out. Obviously, you know, getting back on board with Creatures and then taking the makeup off, yada yada yada. It just makes the history interesting. You know, I mean,
Right.
what would it have been great to get, you know, Love Gun Redux or whatever? Sure, but like, it just makes it more of an interesting body of work overall, which is, it's great. You know, for me, like, it's funny because the only stories that I have, because like you lived to see those albums come out as they did, my only stories for that are like Sonic Boom and Monster, you know, going to FYE or Walmart. But when I was a kid, I mean, talk about winning jackpot. My go-to format before it was vinyl was cassette. I had a little Fisher Price tape deck and all. My dad and I, we'd go to a flea market, and he was collecting baseball cards at the time. So he'd be talking to dealers, getting variants. I remember one day, I'll never forget, every 70s Kiss album on cassette. And I was
Oof.
like, soundtrack of my life is right here. And that was
Right.
it. That I was set to go.
You know, it's funny that you'd say even with Sonic Boom, like I remember the day that came out, and I may or may not have taken the day off from work to go because I remember driving around with my wife and my daughter, and we're driving around and listening to it, and I was just thrilled that it was a new Kiss album, even at that
Yeah.
point, you know, and you remember kind of going through the store and getting your copy and looking for the Kiss World that was supposed to have all that great stuff, you know, traveling amusement park, and the it was just so funny because it was one of those things where even that was just exciting, you know. And I mean, obviously, you know, depending on when people are watching this, I mean, obviously that's, I think, heavy on everybody's heart is obviously losing Ace. And it's one of those things where I think in a way that is one of my biggest takeaways is that we have been absolutely spoiled as Kiss fans that there was always something new. It was going to be a new album. Like I think of high school, like this time of year, September, like those years, 83, 84, 85, 86,
Yeah.
like that's when
Every
I'm
September.
every September there's a new album. Now it's ninth
Yeah.
grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and it would always come out. And I associate that. And the thing was, would they ever take the makeup off? Oh, they took the makeup off. Would they ever put the makeup back on? Oh, they put the make back on. Like going to those early Kiss conventions, and everybody, like, there's not too many things that'll get people to sit Indian style. I don't know if you can say Indian style anymore, but sit cross-legged. Sorry, I don't know if that's politically correct, but the you know, cross-legged on the floor watching, other than maybe a Kiss bootleg or strippers. And it's one of those things where, you know, you'd sit there and watch these bootlegs. Like I remember when Winterland came out and we were at the one convention and everybody's sitting watching a TV with a VCR hooked to it, freaking out. And there was, so like that stuff started to come out, but you always felt there was another show, there was another tour. Then Ace was solo. I would go see those things, and Peter and Ace would tour together. I saw Peter the one year. It's like 1992 in Lodi, New Jersey, at some tiny club called the Players Club. And here's the funny thing. So my wife, which we were dating at the time, we're sitting out front. We met Jennifer and Greg from Connecticut, like the two coolest people you could ever meet. And my friend Frank Hagen, who was the writer, he created Kiss Mask fanzine. So there's five of us. Peter rolls up to the venue in a station wagon from the Lodi Hilton, and they run in the door like it's Madison Square Garden. They just run right by us. Well, anyway, we get in there, and about an hour before the show, there's a curtain up on the top above the stage with these slatted shades. And all of a sudden you see the shades push apart, and it's Ace. And he's doing like a kind of thing, right? And the place goes berserk. I mean, like literally everybody starts going crazy. And about an hour, and now we're waiting still because they sent the headliner home because there wasn't. This is how small this place was. There wasn't enough room on the stage for the headliner or for the opening band's equipment. So anyway, we're standing there. My wife says, "You know, everybody in here has been staring at that slit in the curtain for an hour." And I'm like, "Yeah, but maybe Ace will pop back in the window." And we were loud, and he did come out. And they jammed on Deuce. That's the one I always remember was Ace comes out, and of course it's a bar.
Yeah.
And the place is going berserk. Like, I mean, people are ripping, are jumping and jumping. And he counts off 1, 2, 3, and they're doing Deuce. And it was at that time where, you know, you can't believe that you're seeing them in a club. So look, anybody that's out there that's watching, if you were at that show, you can comment. And you know, but anyway, I think in a way it's been tough. Even when you said, "Hey, look, you want to come on and do this," it's a little tough to talk about because you realize that part of that magic is now gone. And we're not gonna get certain, like we always in your mind, maybe they would do a song together at this Kennedy Center.
Something.
Maybe they would do a one-off show. Maybe Ace would do this with them in Vegas. It was always like, I mean, look, everybody's going to talk about that last show as I wish they had done more. Sure. I really wanted Peter Criss to come out and at least do Beth because they don't need to do any prep. It's the same recording of the background music. If that piano had come up out of the stage and Peter Criss was standing there with it, I would have lost my marbles.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think so. To make a short story really long, I think that's, you know, the thing with always getting the different albums, you know, you'd get different albums and they would feel different because they were different. And it showed the dynamics of 4 super talented people working together and what kind of magic they could create. And I've always just enjoyed every bit of it, you know, and even the fact that then we would get people like super talented. Bruce Kulick comes in, Eric Carr, you know, even Vinnie Vincent, for as much as maybe people really, you know, brought a lot to Kiss, you know, and even then you got Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer, and now more than ever people are upset, you know, the makeup and this and that, but it was always just fun, and there was always something new, you know, with bands that are like here today, gone today. We had 50 years of Kiss, like, you know, and it. What band in 2025 is going to be here 50 years from now? I'd say none. You know, in 50 years from now, it's going to be AI creating music, you know.
Well, well, they're doing that on Spotify already. So we're already kind of getting glimpses of the future.
It's crazy. So, I mean, I don't even know what your question was, but I took the long way. That was the scenic route.
You already aced it, but no pun intended. But you know what? I mean, your story, though, about seeing Peter up in Lodi and Ace and all, like, and also you mentioned with the conventions and watching Winterland, like, that's a period that I missed out. I was born in 97. So, like, I missed out on like, even like fanzines and things like that. Like, I look back now, like, I see, like, where my fandom is. I'm like, why was I several years late to the party? You know what I'm saying? You know, it's I
don't know if you ever read that book. There's that book about fanzines that, you know, and the early ones, and there's a page in there of Kiss Mask, which was Frank's one that I did artwork for, and it's super cool. And then if you've never seen that, the great thing is, especially the early pages, they all have a common thread, which is I worked in a print shop, or I had access to a printer, because you figure it's the early 80s. Like, and a lot of them were done with cutting out and gluing, and there's no Photoshop and all this stuff.
Well, I would imagine too, like, if you worked at a print shop, you would just run it after hours, or
you'd run it after hours. Do you have a copy of that book? If you don't, I'll send you a copy. Because I have another copy of that. It really is.
Now, is it on just Kiss fanzines?
It's all Kiss fanzines, and it goes.
I don't have that book.
I'll dig it out. It was a fantastic book, but I think it in a way, like podcasting, I feel like podcasting is the current generation version of fanzines.
For sure.
Only now everybody kind of has a lot more access to do it. But I mean, it was, you wanted something more. you know, those fanzines at the time. And if you look at Hot in the Shade, if you look at the credits, they thank tons of fanzines.
Wow.
And if you look in there, there's Kiss Mask. And you
Ah.
know, and I did a couple, and it's funny. I look at some of the artwork that people do now where they're so talented. I'm not that talented. I always like drawing, and I have actually I do have a really, one of my favorite things that I ever did for that was, it was Gene Simmons with a pumpkin, and it says Happy Halloween, and we printed them on, and it's, my style is really stylized, kind of cartoony. It's not photorealistic,
Sure.
but he's kind of, you know, with the pumpkin. And Frank was giving them out at a radio station. Eric Carr actually signed one, and he mailed it back, and I still have that. So it's my artwork on this paper signed by Eric Carr, and I love that, you know, like fanzines and podcasts, and, you know, that wanting to kind of just share your love of something. I mean, that's really what it's always been about, I think.
That's awesome. It's interesting because the idea of fanzines and podcasting and connecting, that ironically leads into my next question, which is, what got you into the communications field, and could you also break down your career in radio?
So I was really lucky because where I went to high school, they had a TV studio, and this is 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, whatever, you know, like those years that I was in high school. They actually had you know, I used to have cable, had local cable. And so we would do stuff in high school that then went out on the air to people's homes. You know, and my wife says, and I didn't know her at the time, but she says, we remember watching you, like, and her brother, and they would make fun of us because it was stupid. And it was like, you know, we would make these little movies. And I mean, it's funny. I always loved comic books, and I would draw comic books all the time, like little, you know, and I remember distinctly, it's early, it might be 75 or something like that. My dad, and he, you know, I have two brothers and a sister, and I remember we were maybe being too rowdy or something that day. And he says, if you draw storyboards, I will, you know, we'll make a slideshow out of it when the weather turns nice in the spring. And I'm like, I don't even know what storyboards are. And he taught us really what storyboards. He says, look, it's just like the comic book things that you draw, but you draw what will be in the frame of every photo. And I always think that's kind of how I got started. Was I remember wanting to do things visually, and we did that in the spring. It was like those old books, when you hear the bell, boo, turn to the next slide. And it was totally a ripoff of Planet of the Apes. It was called Escape from the Apes, and it was basically our Mego Planet of the Apes dolls in little settings, and we were doing all the voices into a tape recorder, like, you know, I'm Bob. I'm Cornelius. You know, like, you know, and it's like, if you know your Planet of the Apes stuff, and let's run, and it's a human, and but I think of that all the time, was that even that early on was just kind of learning, and I really wanted to do comic book art, and I loved doing that. I did a lot of that into high school, but really when I went into the media center, you know, our friend that lived up the street, he was the director of the media center, Dr. Warner, and he said, you should come down here. You would like this. And sure enough, I went in, and it was like, I couldn't even believe it, you know, like, and you got to think about it in that era, you know, having a camera, like people didn't really have, like, video cameras was still that huge packet
That was a premier product.
It was a big deal. And so the fact that I could get access to all that stuff, like we did a weekly show called News Scene, and you know, you were out, I did the weather, which, you know, really it's funny looking back on it. There's a little bit of those, a few of them are on my YouTube page. I wish I had a lot more of it. I mean, that stuff just doesn't exist. You know, you never thought to really keep a lot of it, but but that was really, it changed my life. You know, people talk about finding something in school. That really changed my life, because it was this idea of telling stories with video. And then at that same time, like MTV comes out, and I become in love with the idea of making music videos. And I really wanted to make music videos. I did that for a while. I mean, I did everything you can imagine, every kind of editing and wedding and event and you know, it really, and I came up at a time, as you watched it grow from a little more hard to get equipment. Now you have digital editing, eventually edit a lot of stuff with multiple machines tied together with a mixer, which is, which seems unbelievable now when you think about it. You could edit a movie on your phone. All the equipment that I had now exists on your phone in HD. And that was really what it was, and I was always able to find opportunities to do it. Like whether it was, like I say, I did a lot of weddings, like, because it was great money to do weddings. Or I worked for a construction company doing documentary kind of stuff. Like if they were doing a job, we would document it. And I did a lot of that editing. So it was, you try and find work wherever you can. And then eventually, and I'll keep this kind of short, but eventually I had left the job where I was at, New York Camera and Video. Anybody, if you're in that area, New York Camera is the place to be. You can get all your equipment from them. Well, anyway, I left because I had my first daughter and I was spending more time, we were trying to take care of her. So I got a call then from the guy that was running the communication program at Montco, which is Montgomery County Community College. And the reason why I bring that up is because that is also where I broadcast from on Montco Radio. And he said, hey, look, when are you going to come down and teach some classes? I hear the guy that knows all this stuff. And that's 27 years ago. That'll be like 28 years in February that I've been working there. And I love it because it's very creative, but you get to really, the longer I've stayed there, the more you get. Like when you get somebody that walks up and they haven't been there for 10 years and they say, you really helped me when I was here. You put me on the right track. And, it becomes more meaningful when you sit back and you say like, wow, like I did something that was important to somebody. And the broadcasting aspect of it. So again, I'm taking the scenic route on all this. The broadcast
we love this
aspect. Well, they've had WRFM was Radio Free Montco. Started out as a record spinning club in the the 60s. It was a club. And then by 74, they were over to the Bluebell campus where I work. And it's still the only audience was the cafeteria. You broadcast to the cafeteria.
And then did you go to like the intercom system that was there?
It was literally, you had a booth down in the office of Montco or WRFM at the time. 2 long XLRs down the hall into a box with a receiver. Wow. And you had speakers inside, but you were talking the 70s. And your audience was the cafeteria and the ping pong room. And a lot of them that have been back, because we do an alumni broadcast every year, they'll tell you, yeah, that was the audience, the ping pong room. We entertained them. But then the funny thing is probably about 2000, I think it's 2003 or 4, they get intranet so it could be heard on the campus. And then they got internet. So now we were an internet radio station. And that idea that anyone could listen still to this day fascinates me, and this is before really social media, and the whole thing was I would sneak on Montco Radio around my birthday, which is January 5th, because there'd be nobody around. It's winter break.
Sure.
Or spring break, because again, nobody's around. But the big thing, and this is why it all ties back into a lot of these chapters involve Montco, was May 11th, 1974. KISS was scheduled to play at Montgomery County Community College.
What?
And they're the opener for Argent. They're not even the headliner. And in fact, this poster that's behind me, that's because it's the blur, you can't really see it, but it's what I call the Montco poster. And the one date shows May 11th, 1974, Montgomery County Community College, Bluebell, PA, in the gym.
Wow.
And so the thing was really when I started doing stuff, I would always try around May 11th to do what I called the KISS specials. And I would get on there and I would play, and I would always tell you, KISS was supposed to play here. They didn't, blah, 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 blah. But it was my attempt really to bring KISS to Montco every year. And so I did that for a couple years. And this is really before I had a podcast. I never thought of it as a podcast. It was always a radio show. And then it was, May 11th, 2012, I did the May 11th KISS Super Special, which was just really me sitting there playing requests, talking about Kiss, and it was May 11th. And I got such a great feedback from people, dude, you should do this all the time. Why don't you do this all the time? That I said, I'm going to do this all the time. So I started, I created the name The Kiss Room, bought thekissroom.com, and started doing just really once a month, because I always envisioned it as a super special, like those glossy magazines that we all love.
Like a once a year, don't miss it kind of deal.
And then, so then it was once a month. It was, and for a while it was maybe once or twice a month. Then I settled into somewhere along the line, it was always going to be the second Friday of every month, 3 to 5 on Mako Radio. There you go. And it was, it really, the first ever, it's funny, if you go back, you can find the replay of it. It really is me just playing kind of whatever people are texting me. Hey, can you play this? Can you play that? And you hear me giving shout outs to people. Hello, so-and-so just texted me, wants to hear the song. And Frank was there. And one of the things we tried to do was play back. He had an interview with Ace that he had done years earlier. And we tried to hook it from his cassette recorder into the system. And it just didn't work. It literally is like, it's terrible, right? And the funny thing is my daughter, so at the time, so let's see, she's about 6 or 7. And she's with me that day because it's the summer now. And so she's not even in school. And you can hear her say in the background, Dad, it's not working. And that's in there, and it really, but that was the start. And then in the second episode, so now we're talking July 2012, Frank says to me, I know Bruce Kulick. What if he calls into the show? What? And he goes, yeah, I know him. And he gets a hold of Bruce, and Bruce at the time gave us, it's a good half hour, 45-minute interview that was so like raw. There's 2 things I always remember. Number one, the Audio Dog album had just come out, and Bruce was really close with his dog. And he told us the whole story of how he got this dog and his love for this dog. Like, where were you going to hear that? You know what I mean?
That's true. That's true.
And at the time, social media really wasn't so prevalent, which is a big word like gymnasium, but it's one of those things where and then the one line he said, I don't know for a fact, but I know Ace is trying to get back in the band. And this is 2012. And that line lit up like everywhere that I saw Kiss posts. Oh, did you hear what Bruce just said?
That was a focal point.
And it put me on the map. Like the Kiss Room was this show that you could come to for Kiss stuff. So thank you, Bruce Kulick. If you're watching this, obviously you're a fan of Dylan. Thank you, Bruce. It really was. And then we had the next month, they had Lydia Chris. She called in, told us great stories. So it really was always, like I said, I never thought of it so much as a podcast. It was a radio show. Yeah. And it was live. And there's nothing more fun and more adrenaline filled than being live, because if you screw it up, it's out there. People are hearing it. And I've just always loved that. I mean, it's really one of those things where that adrenaline rush of being on the air, Kiss Army, you wanted the best. You got it. I'm Matt Porter. I say shot out of a cannon all the time, because there's, you feel that rush of doing it that is just like really like nothing else. So, and I've just always loved it. So that's really, I've kind of always been into creative things, and just it just kind of led to that. And I think the question I have, how did you get into podcasting? You have a great voice. You're very well spoken. You're great at it. Like I'm curious, who were the people that led you into this?
Well, so to be honest with you, funny, the interviewee is asking the interviewer. I did not expect this. This is not scripted. So for me, like my YouTube channel has always been my umbrella. I just mainly went to it as a means of connecting with other like-minded music lovers, vinyl collectors, and this and that. So I started it in 2018 as like it's funny, I always say it was like a New Year's resolution passion project, because January 1st, 2018 was when I started. And then over course of time, a couple years have passed, I became monetized, and then I started to write for a website and this and that. But then like it's offshoot, like because I did a podcast at one point called Rock City Kitties. And then I had started, you'll appreciate this. I've always been curious about communications and radio. I tried to go for a local college university that had a station. It was a case where they would only take in students, so understood. Then there was,
Understandable.
yeah, and then there was another station, and I had put together a demo. I did crossfades, like I went all out on this thing. And then, sure enough, the way it was, it's a local station. I won't give out the name, but it's tied in with like a local newspaper that's in my neck of the woods. And basically, they were like, all right, if you want airtime, you have to sell advertising. And I'm like, okay, not exactly what I was looking for. So I was like, all right, whatever. So then I started this thing, you know, because I've always had this DIY mentality. Because like I'm like you, I like to be creative. I started a thing called Untracked Grooves, where basically it was the slogan is to play the music FM radio would never dare to play. So
Right.
it was pulling album tracks and taking requests. I did a Kiss block. I haven't done it in a little while because I took in two kittens that I love them to death, but they've taken up my studio space. And plus too, like, cause I would broadcast live on YouTube, copyright police would halt things, and it was just a
Right.
whole hassle. But I've always been intrigued with radio. I appreciate the compliment. A lot of people say that I have the voice for it. I think I
Absolutely.
could excel, but again, I'm just someone that wears a lot of hats, you know, so I have my hands in different pies. So radio is one of them.
Well, because that's the thing. A lot of time, especially, I mean, I watch a lot of podcasts. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of time you say like some of these people, their voices, you go, "What are they doing a
Why?
podcast? You know, why are you doing it?" But look, everybody should do it. Obviously, like you know, it's one of those things where everybody should do it. But I always love it. Like you're so well spoken, and you have a great voice. In a way, it almost is that traditional FM voice. Like, did you watch that documentary? That guy from Cadillac, Michigan. He was, if you haven't watched, like
Yeah.
that guy. Now he's talking about. I watched that, and it felt like the magic of radio. Like here he is, a 19-year-old kid. He's in this radio station that's out in the middle of nowhere, and everybody. He has that one line where he says, "There was nothing to do, so they all listened to me." And he plays his one air check. And his voice at 19 is that great radio voice that you associate.
To.
Yeah, and I was so fascinated. I've watched that a bunch of times because I love that romantic, you know, view of radio back when radio was still a staple. You know, now everybody's on the stage. There's nobody left in the audience. At this point, everybody is talking. I don't think anybody's listening. You know, radio certainly doesn't have the dominance that it did. But I thought that documentary was fantastic. You know,
Yeah.
but
Just a little nugget like that is what the diehards just love. And then the footage that he had shared that he had filmed at the event, and just hearing those, for me, like when I hear someone say Kiss and 1970 whatever in the same sentence, I'm like, tell me more.
Tell me
Please give
more.
Well, hell, I was over at a friend's place for Christmas one year, and her husband's uncle was there. He was like, "Oh yeah, I saw them at Magic Mountain." I'm like, "Wait, what? You mean 19th May 78, Phantom of the Park, Magic Mountain? Give me the rundown."
I love that. Well, you know, it's funny because that's the thing is like the fact that he had footage that was 50 years old and he was just getting it transferred over, and you're like, what? You know, and that was one of the most exciting things that I'd seen in a while, where you're like, you'd never seen it. Nobody had ever seen it. It was not circulated at all.
And that's the beautiful thing that is astounding, because we think that for as much as what has come out in the circles, let's just say, in terms of soundboard recordings, audience stuff, fan film footage, pro shots, to this day, there are still little surprises that come out that have never been seen. And if it's from 50 plus years ago, even better.
It's incredible. It really is.
Now, with you doing the Kiss Room, obviously you found a way to integrate your love for the band into the whole idea that they were supposed to play at the college and such. Do you personally feel that Kiss doesn't get as much love as they deserve on the rock airwaves, in your personal opinion?
You know what? That's been the funniest thing is that over the last couple of days, was to put on the radio and hear them playing Kiss, like actually, like, and a lot of it was, oh yeah, we're the rock station, and we're sad that Ace Frehley has died, and you go, yeah, you should have been playing Kiss all along.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, you're in Jersey, right? So you get WMMR. So
Pierre
MMR,
Robert, baby.
you figure Pierre has always been supportive. Or my favorite really is Jackie Bam Bam. I mean, obviously
Jackie's
Jackie
great.
is a real rocker. Like, I knew Jackie back when he was in bands, and he is, there's no faking that he is a rocker.
Yeah.
So the night Ace had died, he calls me up. I had turned my phone off because my phone was just blowing up, and all of a sudden I turned my phone back on. Dude, call me. And I was on the air with him during his tribute, and he was playing tons of Kiss. And I think that's the thing. A lot of it is, you get these stations. I don't think regular radio has never been a place where you expected to hear a lot of Kiss. There's a couple stations that'll weave it in, but never the amount that it deserves. Like, so in a lot of ways, that's been the fun thing was with Montco Radio, which obviously, like, it's a college radio station. We can kind of do whatever we want. And so if I want to go on and do 2 hours of Kiss, or Saturday nights, I do a show called 10 O'Clock Rock. So this last Saturday, I did 2 hours of Kiss and Ace, and not a lot of talking, because at that point I really was trying to just kind of keep it light and together, and
just fill it in,
yeah, and that's been always the fun thing. And a lot of time it goes back to how I view my show as the glossy magazine, because if you remember, they would always have tons of Kiss, but in the back you'd see pictures of Stars and Angel, and it's where I discovered Parliament, because I didn't really know anything about it other than that picture of George Clinton coming down the spaceship on that Earth Tour album, but because they were all like Casablanca. So I love the fact that via my platform I can play new bands. Like New York Fury is a band that I play a lot because they're big Kiss fans, and also great. I love their album. Or like one of my favorite recent stories is there's a band in the UK called Blitz. And now you figure they're as far away from me as could get. They're in Nottingham by where Sherwood Forest is. Now these guys are a 3-piece band. They're phenomenal. It's a great rock band. And the one day I get an email, hey, we're a band from Nottingham, and would you play your stuff? We love your show. Would you play our song on your show? And sure enough, so then I play it on my show, and I love the idea of sharing things like that. Or Wicked put out their new single. I just played the new single from Wicked that won't come out until the end of the month. And because they're all bands, I always say it's bands that are Kiss adjacent, or like Kiss family. And that's been the most fun thing with being able to kind of really do whatever I want on the radio. And, and we pay ASCAP, BMI and all that. It's all legit, but you play what you want. It's kind of more of the satellite radio model of just lots of music rather than, it's the top of the hour and we have the weather coming up, Nobody cares about that. You want that, it's on your phone. So it's,
and it honestly, it's very invigorating to hear that, because I mean, I know that I've talked about, my flirtations with the communications industry. I still always think about a job in radio, and I look at like the local stations that are out by like the Jersey Shore and such.
Yeah.
And I look at the playlist of songs and I'm like, yeah, I like Stone Temple Pilots, but I don't know if I want to hear them like every 3 hours.
See, I think that's one of those things. If you could get on there and have your niche show, like if you went on there and you could pick the playlist, it would be revolutionary, because that's the thing I always like, is the fact that, like, when you think about the 70s and those DJs could choose what they wanted to play, even Howard Stern, you listen to Howard Stern, those best of Howard Stern, and he talks about being at the tiny station, but they could play whatever they wanted. And to me, that's that romantic version of radio, was when it didn't, that you could hear anything, and you didn't hear as much Kiss. I mean, that's why we had to buy all the records, because you didn't hear Kiss on the radio.
I know, it's funny, even as a kid, like, I'll flat out say it. One Kiss song I never want to hear again is Rock and Roll All Night. But when the live version from Alive comes on the radio, I get fucking pumped. Like, just the fact that I'm like, my boys are getting some love, just that notion alone.
It's funny, that sense that you said, if I never heard it again. Now, with a tear in my eye, I'd say I'd give just about anything to hear them do it again. You know, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, when you really stop and think about it, anytime you hear those drums, that drum intro, I will be happy to hear it. And yeah, we've all heard it 80 billion times, but there's something about that because also you associate it with every show you've seen and the big finale, and here comes the confetti, and now you're stuffing confetti in your pocket. And you know, it really, you know, it's funny. I think it's one of those things where people get tired of it because you always hear it, but there's a reason why you always hear it because that's the greatest song. That was actually my one wish that I really wanted for the final show was if they had done Rock and Roll All Night and everybody got up there and did a solo, everybody got up there and sang. It could have been like, it's funny, years ago, my brother will laugh but I mean, it used to be fun. We would go to these clubs and we knew everybody in every band and they would jump up on stage with each other and you'd see these huge jams with like this one from that band and this one from that band. And I wanted that for the last show. I wanted that, that feeling of like the biggest party on the planet with everybody there.
You know, there's a lot of opinions and views on what they could have done at MSG on December 2nd.
Right.
And look, and if that had happened, what you just explained, I would have died happy.
Right.
I went into that show expecting the same show that I saw at the Hollywood Bowl a month prior.
Right.
And it, you know, and look, maybe Paul mentioned some banter about, you know, them playing at the Garden for the first time in 77 or something that was a little unscripted compared to how the rest of the shows typically were. I mean, look, just the fact, you know, that I was in that room, granted, I was up in the nosebleeds that I paid a stupid price for. Fist pumping and shout it out loud at the end of the day. That's all that mattered. That's all that mattered.
Being there and seeing so many people that you knew and the way that, like, especially with the internet, you kind of know everybody by their well-timed selfie, you know, from Facebook or whatever. And they really did a great job of making New York City feel like Kiss World. Like everywhere you looked, you saw like those newspapers and
the
posters
pop-up store.
Everywhere. The pop-up store, you know, it was incredible. And so, yeah, I don't even know what we were talking about, but
no, it really was Kiss World. I'd imagine a place that maybe would have came in second or maybe did it better was Cadillac a couple weekends ago.
Right, which looked incredible.
Yeah,
I would have liked to see that.
A buddy of mine sent me some brochures and a T-shirt, and I was like, God damn, like it's awesome.
Yeah.
So with the Kiss show kind of being freeform Kiss radio, basically, or Kiss adjacent, as you were saying, is it basically just anything goes, or do you kind of curate broadcasts to fit within a specific theme?
You know, a lot of time it's based on kind of current events. Like obviously this last one was October, so I start off with some Halloween kind of a stuff, and then I've been very lucky because I have a group that we called the Kiss Room House Band for about the last 10 years that they do covers and do a set of covers. Before COVID, they would all come and everybody would pile into the studio and play covers live. And it was the greatest
That's awesome.
Party you could ever imagine. And then obviously COVID comes and you know, you can't do it. So they've been pre-recording. They're working on eventually recording every song, a cover of every song. And, you know, we'll see if we can get there, but and then it really is just if somebody wants to call in, like sometimes people have, you know, some of these bands might have an album coming out, they'll call in. I like to get people involved with it. But it's always kind of like the next one. Obviously, I'm going to go to Vegas, and so the November broadcast of the Kiss Room will be us talking about going to Las Vegas. You know, Bobby and I are both going, and he's been my co-host of the Kiss Room for about 10 years. And it's just, you know, that, so we just, and my brother will come in, Bob Brodsky. I'm thinking of all the people that like, I have Kiss friends from forever who are local enough to come into the studio and we talk about Kiss. And, you know, a lot of us have very shared stories, you know, things that we have done together that we reminisce about, but it's, you know, a lot of time it's kind of whatever's going on. And, you know, it's, so there's not really like, a rigid thing. One thing that I started a couple years ago was I called it the Kiss Room Demos Project. And the idea was if you could write a song for Kiss and hand them a demo, what would it sound like? And at first I thought I'd get a lot of, right? But instead, I was blown away by the fact that people were sending these amazing quality demos, some of them that you could totally hear Kiss doing. I mean, it's if you go to the kissroom.com and click on the demos page, there's 8 albums already of that. And we had Classic before they were called Classic 78. They were just called Classic. Tom sent me the version that's on the first version of them is a demo before they even released anything. And it's like, and I remember at that point being blown away. But like people send me stuff like, and if you go, you'll see all their names. They send me stuff that is incredible. So that's like another flavor of the show. It's things I like to have people involved, like really get people to be involved in what we do. And that's been a really fun thing is like, to do kind of, and then we'll do like a listening party and we'll play the song and then kind of talk about it and then play the next song. And it's just something different. Like I try and always mix it up, and I do try and run it, really as kind of a radio, like where you're like top of the hour, bottom of the hour, you head to the quarter, and I try and change the topics. So it's not just me, yammering on about one topic. It's usually I try and cram a lot into 2 hours.
That's tremendous, and it just sounds like such a liberating just platform to be on, and the way that it's operated and everything, it's fantastic, and your enthusiasm to get people involved too. Like I feel like that makes it more encouraging for bands to submit things to you to play on air and whatever. So that's tremendous. But you had mentioned that you had Bruce Kulick on, Lydia Chris, etc. Obviously notable names within the Kiss circle. Is the official Kiss camp / Doc McGee aware of what it is that you do by giving the hottest band in the world its own focus on the airwaves?
I'd love to think so, but I don't really think I don't know that they really care at this point. Like, it's funny back in the day when like we were talking about fanzines back at Hot in the Shade, that was how they were getting the word out was fanzines. Yeah. And I think they really appreciated that now. Now there's so many podcasts. I don't think they care. Like, I don't think they're sitting there listening going, wow, he really said something good. Or man, these guys are dicks. They, bust on us.
I think it's like, they announced obviously because that this past Thursday went from being such a euphoric day because Dress to Kill box set's coming. And then all of a sudden, things went pear-shaped when the news of Ace's passing went. So when they announce a new project or product, there's publicity just right off the bat.
Right. You're not getting a scoop on anything. Like, at this point, everybody has their own platform. Like if I could get Gene Simmons to call in, he's not going to say anything to me that he hasn't already said. I mean, really every, you know what I mean? Like it's rare that you hear. That's why, I mean, going back to it, like when we had that interview with Bruce Kulick, he was telling us really personal stuff about his life, about how he found his dog and this and that and the other that you weren't going to hear somewhere else. Now everybody has their own channel or whatever. So I don't know that it's funny. I mean, and I'll tell you, this is a little bit of a side story was I did go out to Las Vegas in March. I got invited as part of that Pophouse panel. And the funny thing is, and I'm not trying to name drop, but like I sat across the table at dinner from Tommy Thayer, and he was super nice. And like, but we're just talking about regular stuff. You weren't talking like, Tommy, can you tell me? Like it wasn't like that at all. And then Doc, obviously, like, Doc was super nice. But I don't know that he's aware. Like, I think he knows everybody there does podcasts or whatever, but I don't think he would say, oh, you're the guy that does the Kiss Room. I would never feel that there's any kind of recognition like that.
But it's great that you mentioned that, because that's something I wanted to talk about to sort of wrap it up, because obviously you were invited along with other Kiss fans and people that have their platforms. Did Pophouse specifically choose you to come out because you have your Kiss-centered platform pretty much?
there was about 10 people that were fans, and a lot of them podcasters who you'd know every
Yep.
one of them, were fanzine people. And I think at the time they were just looking for people that they knew were still kind of actively Kiss fans that still enjoy Kiss, you know what I mean? And it's like, and I think I've been on the radar, I think, for a while. You know, it's like, you know, as far as, and really shout out to Keith LaRue. I mean, the fact that
Yeah.
I know Keith, I think Keith is the one that said, here, we should put this guy on the team. You know, so thank you, Keith, because that was, I mean, really a fun opportunity. I think that's really where it came from. I mean, you know, it was a really good group of people. And at that time, you know, and look, I won't kid anybody and say that I think that they sat there, you know, really listening to every word we said. I mean, obviously, if they had shown us the, you know, like the Asylum artwork without, you know, Bruce and Eric, everybody in the room would have been like, well, no, but we never saw that kind of stuff. I mean, really my favorite thing that I've done as part of it was when they let me do that playlist, and they were
That's
trying
right.
to launch that. And it was fun because it was a way, like they were, I thought the playlist was a great idea because it's a very entry level way to get everyone involved, because it didn't cost anything. You didn't have to buy anything. All you had to do was go in and listen.
That's it.
And the fact that I got to be first, and it was a celebration of music, which oddly enough, it's sometimes I feel like some fans don't really even care about the music. They just like to fight. But 99% of the feedback was great, you know, and
Yeah.
that was really my kind of thing, that I felt like Pophouse really trusted me with doing that first one and launching what I think should be even an ongoing series. They've had like 3, you know, following me, it was Lori, who I had on my show, is the
Yeah.
Rose, and she's awesome. And it's her playlist totally different. But again, it gives you like a framework. Why'd you pick these certain songs? You know, and so that part of being part of Pophouse, I thought was a lot of fun, you know, and it really was, there was, for considering that as soon as you launch something out onto the internet, there's going to be a certain contingent that's going to instantly hate you. Most of it was really, you know what I mean? Most of it was really positive.
So would you say why you were there was kind of for consultant work, more or less? Like, were they just bouncing without going into too much detail?
They were bouncing ideas. And at that time, they had not announced the Las Vegas thing, and they were bouncing ideas about that. They were bouncing ideas about the website design. Mark Cicchini from Three Sides has
Great
this
guy.
ability to tell you the date where a photo was taken. Like they were pulling up slides, and oh, that's November 13th, 1979 at 5:15 p.m. And I just sat there. I was like, look at that guy. And I mean, that was what made it really fun, was you're in a room full of people that really know their stuff. And it couldn't have been more fun just from that point of view. But yeah, I think they were just throwing out ideas. I think they were at a point where they were just getting things going. You know, I made a lot of suggestions for things that I don't think anybody listened to, you know, but you go, it's all logistics. You know what I mean? Like you go, well, you can only do so much.
Well, that, and it's also business. And if they're going to
Right.
invest in this and that, and of course, I'd imagine, at least maybe in my perspective, maybe they want to do something that keeps the everyman, you know, in the market. And whether if something's deemed too niche or whatever, it can fall in either way. Now, I will ask, because obviously Pophouse is hands on with the brand and the copyrights. Was there any talk of releases or future projects with box sets off the soundboards, anything
You know what?
archival?
It's funny because we talked about at that, and it's not really, I could probably say it, but they talked about that Asylum tour release. We knew about that, and they showed us the artwork and everything looked amazing.
Yeah.
Obviously they didn't listen when I said, man, you really got to release those on CD, you know. But you know, it's
In
like I had to
Japan
buy
only.
I was to say I had to buy it in Japan. We did see some of the box sets that are now out, so it's like, you know, that you know of, obviously the Dress to Kill now, that they talked about that. You know, there certainly there was talk of the Alive box set, but I mean that's not unknown. I mean, you know, if everything that Eddie Kramer has said about it already, like the idea that they're going to have a box that includes all the raw recordings, things like that, that'll be incredible. I mean, I don't think anybody would be surprised because I mean he's already said it.
Yeah.
But you know, and it was really fun because a lot of it, I get the feeling a lot of the people that we met anyway at Pophouse, it's a young crowd. They're they're younger than me, and I think they were just trying to get a sense of, you know, maybe these guys that we're talking to talk to enough Kiss fans, they can tell us what people are looking for.
They know what people want.
Yeah, and I think you know, that was the main thing. And again, it was a very fun group, and it's people that have been so passionate about it for so long. The fact that you have people that have done fanzines, like really well-known fanzines, and I won't name everybody that was there because then I'll forget somebody. But it was really mainly it was really fun. Like, I mean, obviously, like Joe Polo, I know in real life, you know, we've hung out before. So the fact that we could hang out together, you know, Joe from Podcast Rock City, greatest guy, hanging out in Vegas, you know, it was fun. I mean, and that's the thing. I really can't say enough of the fact that it really was a blast, you know, and nobody went in there with any kind of egos. It really was a great group of people. And I enjoyed the heck out of going. It was really something special for me.
That's tremendous. Without, again, disclosing too much, because obviously I'm sure they've touched on many things. A lot of ideas were brought up by you and other people. So far, in terms of what Pophouse has done already and what has yet to be done, would you say the Kiss Army at large will be pleased with what they're doing and what they have in store to keep the flame burning still into perpetuity?
I mean, really, even if all we ever got were these box sets, like that Dress to Kill box set, I think is incredible. You know, if
when I saw the vinyl, I'm like, bing, done.
Well, it's funny because one of the things that, and they would sometimes they would actually almost roll their eyes when it was almost like, unless it involves music, the fans don't seem to want it. And like when the tank game came out, right? Like, yeah. I'm not that excited about the tank game.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that obviously they're trying to reach a different audience and a younger audience, you know. So things like that. But I always look at it as take what you like and leave the rest for somebody else. You know, it really, things like that, you know, I really want a Grand Theft Auto style Kiss game where it's 1974 and you get in a car that's 1974 and you turn on the radio and you hear Kiss music and you start out by, you meet Gene and Paul and they say you have to go pick up Ace for his audition. And you now have a driving mission where you would go and you go to Ace's house. You have to help him take his amp. You have to drive him back, but it's all driving missions, but it would be all Kiss themed. So I think something like that would be like, I want something super, super Kiss centric. Like like eventually now your job, you and Peter have to drive around hanging up flyers for the next gig, and you drive around and now your guy, just like in Grand Theft Auto, you can get out and staple posters up to the you know, the wall, and now you're running, but it's you and Peter Criss. And then like, you know, eventually you move up to your driving the limo, or you have to get the groupies out of Paul's hotel room. Like you're driving around, but it would all be in the 70s. So you'd have 70s era cars, you know, driving around I would start, you know, eventually you get like maybe like a junker, but then you get a better car. Maybe at some point it advances and you have DeLorean and you're driving with Ace. That's the kind of game that I want. That's way off the track of what we're talking about. Anybody, it's an hour into this show. If you're holding on to my meandering way of talking, you're in my brain already.
Well, not for anything. Pophouse, are you listening to this? Because I would love that.
Wouldn't that be great? I mean, because, and you figure in a lot of ways, it's funny that if you ever watch those shows called The Toys That Made Us, they call it sticker slapping, where they take a toy that already existed and just put a different sticker on it. Like, you know, the Batcave is now the Planet of the Apes or whatever. They already have Grand Theft. You know what I mean? Like all they got to do is slap on.
Well, not to mention, weren't the 77 Mego dolls something else before they got the makeup?
Well, that the Paul Stanley, that's the famous thing, is that's Daryl Dragunov, Captain, and Tennille's head. And it's hysterical when you think about that. But so really, to kind of wrap it around, I think that everything that we talked about that weekend, some of the stuff has materialized, and in a very satisfying way. I mean, and certainly I'm not going to say, oh, I had any kind of great input. I think a lot of this stuff would have, I mean, it was already going to happen. But there's things, they have some things lined up that are still exciting. It's going to be exciting. I think it really is, like, their whole mission is to keep these classic artists alive. And I think now more than ever, I mean, ironically, you say now more than ever, you know, that's a pretty lofty goal. It's funny, the Kennedy Center thing where they talk about, like, oh, it's the greatest honor that American musician can ever get. No. People have your name tattooed on their arm. I have I don't have a Kiss tattoo, but people have the logo tattooed.
Yeah.
People with their face. You got a room full of albums behind you that is a time capsule. That is the greatest honor. And that is how a band will live forever, is the fact that every generation is going to at some point listen to those songs, and go, wow, my great granddad liked Kiss. That's the greatest honor.
Yeah.
You know, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ended up seeming like a bust, right? And everybody goes, oh, wouldn't it be great? Who cares about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? We have better Rock and Roll Hall of Fames in our houses. They're called Kiss Rooms. That's why I called my show The Kiss Room, because everybody has their corner or their closet or their room or their house that is filled with Kiss stuff. That's the greatest honor that a band can ever get, is that people still care a lot.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, you had mentioned, like, you know, with the Kennedy Honors. Look, to me, I think Kennedy Honors is a bit more cooler than the Hall of Fame, but the Hall of Fame is a whole other can of worms that we won't go into, because then this will be a 1 to 2 hour show. But where can people listen to the Kiss Room? Tell the people.
All right. So the first thing you could do is, if you go to thekissroom.com, obviously that's my main website. But really, I'd like to put a plug in. Everybody should go to Montco Radio. It's MONTCO RADIO. Think montcoradio.com. It is a 24-hour, 365 days a year streaming radio station that, I'm on once a month doing the Kiss Room. But you never know what you're going to hear. You're going to hear young people doing shows, everything from rock and jazz, with some great jazz shows. There's some of them more popular shows, but like classic rock. And there's a guy that was on today plays like space age kind of music. It's really like, you never know from hour to hour what you're going to get. Small
shameless plug. My friend Ava is on the air as well.
Absolutely. You know, and she's got her own show this semester. So it's one of those things, you know, that she does a great job, and everybody can tune in live, and it is legit live radio. So if you go to thekissroom.com, obviously there's a link to there. I made a page called Back Issues that has about the first 10 episodes from 2012. You can listen to them. Then if you go to there's a replay page, you can listen to about the last 2 years worth via my Podomatic account. And some of them still exist on the podcast page, but they're retired, so that doesn't get updated at all. But it's out there, you know. And I mean, the main thing, I'd love you to listen to some of the new stuff.
Yeah.
So if you listen to me talking with Dylan for an hour, maybe you'd like to listen.
Be sure to go to thekissroom.com. Matt
Absolutely.
Porter, thank you so much, man.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Hell yeah.
So there you guys go. That is the 8th episode of Council of the Elder, talking radio and Pophouse with Matt Porter of the Kiss Room. If you have suggestions on future episodes and who to have involved in this series, please shoot me a comment down below. I'd love to know. And if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video, and most importantly, keep the record spinning.